Mushoku Tensei, Jobless Reincarnation Season 1 begins by showing Rudy's background, starting since he has not been reincarnated. It is said that there is a 34-year-old man who has locked himself in his room for 20 years after being a victim of bullying. Since then, he has lived in solitude and has no work. One day, both of his parents died. Unfortunately, Rudy's not attend the funeral and instead was busy alone in his room. Relatives and family who knew Rudy's did not come to the funeral of his own parents, finally kicked him out of the house. Rudy's wandered alone on the street until he saw a female student arguing with two male students. Not only that, but he then realized that a high-speed truck was coming toward them. Without thinking, he jumped in front of the truck to stop its speed and not hit the students. On the other side of the world, a husband and wife named Paul Grayrat, a swordsman, and healer, Zenith, have just given birth to a child. The boy named Rudy's is the reincarnation of a man who previously died because he was hit by a truck. Paul's maid and school friend, Lilia, assisted the husband and wife pair in looking after Rudy's. After Rudy's was 6 months old, he finally had consciousness. Uniquely, Rudy's still remembers his previous life and realizes that he is currently reincarnated. Rudy's was astonished and amazed by his new world. He slowly understands that his parents have their own strengths. This happened after Rudy's saw his father showing his sword skills while Zenith healed his wound after falling from a chair by using magic. Rudy's realized that he was reincarnated into the world of sword and sorcery. Rudy's was eager to learn magic, even though he was still very young. He used the reading ability from his previous life to start studying the magic books of Paul and Zenith. From these books, he then knows that the capacity of magic or mana has been determined since the person was born. Meanwhile, to be able to cast magic, he must cast a spell. Rudy's became more and more curious about trying magic, so he cast one of the spells from the book to draw out water. That success made him excited to try again to cast the same spell, until finally Rudy's found he could cast magic without the need to cast a spell and only by using his imagination. But when he was about to try again, the mana he had seemed drained, and so was his energy. He then fell and fainted. After a few years, Rudy's practiced more and more and discovered new facts about magic. One of them was a mistake in the book he read about mana. He realized that mana is not determined when a person is born, but will continue to increase as the person uses magic more and more. Besides that, some people can cast magic without spells like him. Even so, Rudy's realized that not all magic can come out only through imagination. Some magic, such as healing magic, will still require special spells. Rudy's continued to practice the water magic he had previously been able to cast, until finally, he managed to manipulate the water magic to shoot and so on. Rudy's was sure that his mana would increase even more if he practiced often. Even so, he apparently still has trauma from his past life. This can be seen from Rudy's, who often practices magic alone in the warehouse at home than outside the house. One time, Rudy's was practicing casting water cannon magic. At that time, the magic he cast was so great that he finally broke into the warehouse wall. Paul and Zenith rushed to the warehouse after hearing an explosion and thought that a monster had attacked their child. But Zenith saw the magic book Rudy's had read, and realized that Rudy's cast the magic. Zenith felt very happy and proud because a young Rudy's could cast such large magic. She then asked Paul to bring in a magic teacher to train Rudy's, so that in the future, their son could become a great person. But initially Paul refused because apparently they had agreed for Rudy's to become a swordsman like his father. Before the debate between husband and wife heated up, Lilia suggested that Rudy's study magic in the morning and then study swordsmanship in the afternoon. Paul and Zenith agreed with the suggestion. Long story short, Paul and Zenith brought in a magic teacher named Roxy Magurdia. Roxy is a girl of demon origin with a youthful appearance, despite her actual age being over 40 years old. She was initially hesitant and almost refused to teach Rudy's because she thought he was too young. But after Rudy's showed his ability to cast water magic without a spell, Roxy was interested and agreed to teach him magic. That evening, Zenith and Paul invite Roxy to have dinner together. Rudy's realized how his life was now very different from before, and he was determined to do his best. Rudy's and Roxy spent their days practicing magic. In every practice, Rudy's always uses large magic to increase his mana. One night, Roxy told the history of the war that took place 4 centuries ago between the demon Laplace and humans. In that war, A super tribe of demon origin was very feared because he did not hesitate to kill anyone. Roxy says that the super tribe has a special characteristic, namely green hair and a red gem on the forehead, and until now will kill anyone they meet. 1 year has passed. Rudius has so much mana that he can use magic without fear of running out of mana. Even though his magic training process went smoothly, Rudius' sword practice was the exact opposite. When Rudius' 5th birthday, his family celebrated with a small party. At that time, Rudius received a sword from Paul, a magic book from Zenith, and a wand from Roxy. Right at that moment, Roxy told Rudius that he would have the final test tomorrow, which meant that magic lessons with her would end soon. The next day as planned, Roxy invites Rudius to go outside the village to take the final test. Rudius initially refused because he still had trauma from his previous life and until then had never left the house. But Roxy convinced, even mocked Rudius for coming with her out of the village, which left Rudius no other choice. They arrived at a large field, and Roxy told him that they would use cumulonimbus magic in this final test, which would issue a thunderstorm. She asked Rudius to pay attention to this magic because she could only cast it once. Rudius then intends to be able to cast this magic very well as a thank you, and at the same time prove himself to Roxy. After he cast the spell, he managed to cast cumulonimbus magic, which was even bigger than Roxy's before. After that, Roxy said there was no more magic that she could teach and decided that Rudius had passed. Roxy decided to continue the journey after teaching Rudius and returned to wandering. Before leaving, she gave Amamori, which was the protective talisman of demon origin. The first experience of leaving the house with Roxy turned out to successfully make Rudius' trauma disappear. In the following days, Rudius had more and more frequently left the house and traveled to the village. Until one day, Rudius saw 3 men bothering someone. He remembered his father's message to protect the weak, so he chased away the bullies and saved the person. But what he didn't expect, the person he had just saved had green hair, which reminded him of Roxy's story about the super tribe. However, upon closer inspection, Rudius was sure that the little boy was not from the super tribe because there was no red gem on his forehead. They became acquainted and the child was named Sylph, a half-elf. Sylph then said that he was bullied by the children because of his green hair and that he was thought to be from the super tribe. Rudius felt guilty because at first he thought the same thing, so he helped clean Sylph's hair using water magic. Sylph is surprised to see Rudius' ability and begs that he too can learn magic. Months passed. Sylph studied magic with Rudius until one day, he wanted to be able to cast magic without the need to cast spells. Rudius, although initially convinced that Sylph wouldn't be able to, still teaches that he only needs to use his imagination. Unexpectedly, Sylph managed to cast magic without spells, just like Rudius. At that time, it suddenly rained, and a storm fell, so Rudius took Sylph home. Lilia had prepared warm water for Rudius to take a bath at home, so she invited Sylph to take a bath together. But strangely, Sylph refuses to take a bath with Rudius, which makes Rudius instead force Sylph to take off his clothes. He actually wondered why Sylph was embarrassed when they were both boys. It's just that at that time, Rudius was surprised and realized he had been wrong all this time. Sylph is actually not a boy but a girl with the full name Sylphiette. Time passed, and at one point Zenith announced her pregnancy. But surprisingly, at the same time, Lilia was pregnant, and it was Paul's child. Paul apologized for having an affair with Lilia, even though it was Lilia who actually teased Paul first. Rudius felt sorry for hearing Lilia's plan to go back to her hometown, and would most likely die due to a blizzard. He then approached Zenith and lied, saying that Paul actually forced them to have intercourse. Hearing the explanation from his son, Zenith then forgave Lilia and allowed her to stay with them. Long story short, a few months after that, Lilia and Zenith gave birth to 2 daughters named Aisha and Norn. While on the other hand, Rudius hesitated because his magic ability did not develop. He then plans to continue studying magic at Renoa Magic Academy, but Sylph forbids him. She cries and says she can't be separated from Rudius. However, Rudius' desire to continue his education grew stronger when he received a letter from Roxy. Roxy explains that she has mastered high-level magic and suggests that Rudius come to Renoa Magic Academy if he feels his magical abilities are not developing. The next day, Rudius revealed his intentions to his parents. He asked Paul and Zenith to all pay for self-schooling at Renoa Magic Academy. Unfortunately, Paul refused the request, so Rudius decided to work to pay for Sylph's education later. A few days later, their family had a visitor, a beast woman named Ghislaine Dodolia. After introducing Ghislaine as his old friend, Paul suddenly attacks Rudius and knocks him unconscious with his sword ability. When Rudius woke up, he was already in the horse carriage with Ghislaine. Ghislaine hands over a letter from Paul which states that Rudius will work teaching a princess in the city of Roa. Ghislaine promised to teach Rudius swordsmanship as long as he wanted to teach her about magic. Long story short, they arrived at Roa. Rudius and Ghislaine meet Philip Boreas Grerat, who is none other than Paul's brother, who explains that later Rudius will teach his daughter, Eris. Philip said that Eris was so spoiled and unruly that many magic masters decided to withdraw. Sure enough, when they were introduced, Eris was angry because Rudius was still so young. She beats Rudius, who immediately hides in fear. Seeing that, Philip again asked if Rudius would give up being her teacher, but Rudius insists on continuing the work and suggests that they plan a kidnapping. Rudius planned that later when he and Eris were kidnapped, he would explain why learning magic was so important. Philip agreed with the plan. As night fell, Eris and Rudius were suddenly tied up and taken to the warehouse. At that time, Rudius easily untied them using magic power, but because Eris didn't have that power, she couldn't untie her hands. Rudius took the opportunity to convince Eris to learn magic, but Eris persisted and called out to Ghislaine for help. The commotion made one of their kidnapping bandits come and beat her. At first Rudius was very happy because the bandits were acting like real kidnappers, but he heard the kidnappers' words about the plan to kill them. Rudius realized that they were the real kidnappers, and he tried to escape through the window using earth magic. Even though he already knew that the kidnapping was real, Rudius still insisted he didn't want to help or heal Eris. Eris continued to make a fuss, so one of the bandits tried to re-enter. Eris, finally feeling scared, pleads with Rudius to save her and promises to obey all of his orders. Finally, Rudius healed Eris's wounds and took her away from the warehouse. After escaping, Eris still intends to break her promise to obey all of Rudius' words, but when she sees Rudius is about to leave her alone, she is afraid again and truly promises to keep her words. Long story short, they both returned to Roa's city and were awaited by one of the Philip family servants. As they approached the maid, suddenly a bandit ambushed and abducted Eris again. Rudius and the servant tried to catch her back, and Rudius used earth magic to trap the bandits. Unexpectedly, the servant actually offered money to Rudius to release the bandits. It turned out that the maid had been conspiring to kidnap Eris. Rudius wasn't tempted by the offer, even though the amount would be enough to pay for his and Sylph's schooling at Renoa Magic Academy. Rudius tried to outwit the bandits, and at the same time, asked Ghislaine for help by releasing magic into the sky. The magic that became the fireworks caught the attention of Ghislaine, who immediately approached the place where the bandits had escaped and started attacking Rudius with swords. Rudius' sword skills were so low, he couldn't fight the bandits before Ghislaine came to the rescue. Ghislaine immediately killed the two bandits, which made Rudius quite stunned. After that, she caught the maid. After arriving home, Eris kept her promise and accepted Rudius as her magic teacher. The days passed, and Rudius then taught Eris and Ghislaine about magic. Not only that, but Rudius taught the two of them to read and some other lessons. Instead, Ghislaine taught Eris and Rudius swordsmanship. Eris always looks bored when it comes to lessons other than magic. Meanwhile, she actually has more sword skills than Rudius. Eris could even master various sword techniques in a short amount of time. Even so, Rudius was frustrated that Eris didn't want to learn to read either. He then asked Ghislaine for help to persuade Eris. Finally, Ghislaine told him about her past when she was still in the Black Wolf Fangs group. Paul and Zenith were part of the group too. When Zenith and Paul marry, the group disbands, and Ghislaine goes on the adventure alone. But in her adventure, Ghislaine has difficulty because she can neither read nor count. She was often deceived by the sword so that the money was not left. Ghislaine's fate was so pathetic because she had no money and ended up starving. Ghislaine's story inspires Eris to learn to read and count. After that, they continued their studies until several months had passed. One day, Eris, Rudius, and Ghislaine went to the market in Roa town after getting tired of studying. There, Rudius saw the floating fortress belonging to Perugius Dola, a hero who managed to kill the demon Laplace 4 centuries ago. Perugius was reportedly still living in the castle. The scene moves to Eris's birthday, and Rudius gives some of his teaching time to Edna, who will teach Eris how to dance. Because at her birthday party, Eris, as a noble, must be able to dance. The reduced teaching time gave Rudius more free time, so he began to study in Philip's family library. Rudius finds a magic book but can't understand the language, which is the language of demon origin. He then remembered Roxy, the former teacher from demon origin, so he asked her for help in learning the language. Meanwhile, on the other hand, Eris' dance practice doesn't go smoothly, and Edna asks Rudius for help. At that time, Rudius had not yet succeeded in learning the demon language, so he agreed to accompany Eris to learn to dance. On the other hand, Roxy sent a book to help Rudius learn the demon language. Long story short, Eris's birthday arrived and was celebrated with so much luxury. Unfortunately, when Eris was about to do the first dance, she fell down, so she was criticized by the guests. Seeing that, Rudius became pitiful and asked Eris to dance with him. He then used a sword technique to help Eris dance better, and it worked. Eris and Rudius amaze the guests and make their families very happy. After the party was over, Rudius, Eris, and Ghislaine were in the room. Rudius congratulated them because they both had passed magic lessons, and then presented them with magic wands. Ghislaine gave Eris a ring because she had graduated from sword learning. 2 years passed, and when it was Rudius's birthday, Eris and Ghislaine planned a surprise party for him. The surprise moved Rudius, especially since Eris gave him a magic wand, named Aqua Harsha, as a gift. Meanwhile, a black cloud covered the entire city. Roxy, who saw the black cloud and sensed that something was wrong with Rudius, so she rushed over to Roa. The black cloud caught the attention of Demon Emperor Kishirika Kishirisu and Dragon King Ostad. Perugius Dola sensed something was wrong with the black cloud and asked his men, Aramanfi, to investigate. He then ordered to kill anyone who got in the way. Meanwhile, Rudius intends to try the magic wand from Eris to take out Cumulonimbus. But just then, someone suddenly came to attack him. Luckily, Ghislaine saves him, and it is revealed that the mysterious assailant is Aramanfi. Aramanfi blamed Rudius for the black cloud, but Ghislaine swore that Rudius had nothing to do with it. Finally, Aramanfi believed Ghislaine's oath and left them. At the same time, an explosion occurred in the sky, causing teleportation to occur. Unfortunately, Rudius, Eris, Ghislaine were hit by the explosion. The Season 2 begins by showing Roxy, Talhan, and Alanales, who has arrived on the Devil's Continent. Meanwhile, Rudius, Eris, and Ruigerd are trying to raise enough money to pay for the voyage to the Millis continent. That night, when Rudius fell asleep, he again dreamed of meeting a human god, and this time the god asked him to go to the market and feed a small child who was in trouble in a narrow alley. The next morning, Rudius rushed to the market to buy food and turned into a narrow alley to give the food to the little girl he had first met. It turned out that the person he fed was one of the demon queens named Kishirika, who was waiting for someone to be given her special magic power. Because Rudius had given her delicious food, Kishirika also thanked him by giving him one of the 12 demon eyes that she had. If the demon eye is activated, Rudius will have the ability to see what will happen in the future. 2 weeks had passed, and Rudius' team still hadn't collected enough money to pay for the voyage to the Millis continent. Coincidentally, a male swordsman named Garrus heard their troubles. He offers to help pay for all the shipping costs for the Rudius team with an agreement that they must be willing to help him take care of the contraband he has. Rudius' team was forced to accept the offer because they had no other way to go to the Millis continent, even though Garrus didn't want to tell them about the item he had smuggled. The next day, Rudius and Eris set off by boarding the top of the ship, while Ruigerd would hide in the lower cabin of the ship with Garrus' other contraband. After sailing for several hours, they finally arrived at the port of Millis continent, and Rudius' team prepared to get off the ship. However, when Rudius intends to pick up Ruigerd from the cabin under the ship, he finds out that the items that Garrus smuggled in are children of animal races who want to be traded as slaves. This obviously made Rudius' team feel very angry. Even though Garrus had helped them sail to their destination, they couldn't stay silent about the crimes committed by Garrus. Therefore, Rudius' team immediately killed all the guards and captured Garrus before finally Ruigerd and Eris left the ship with all the animal race children who had been kidnapped by Garrus. Meanwhile, Rudius tries to save a large dog, another Garrus group prisoner. Unfortunately, after he managed to save the dog, 2 men from the animal race suddenly appeared and caught him. Rudius was taken to prison by them because they thought he was one of the group members that kidnapped their children. Rudius can only wait for help from Rudy and Eris because all his wands have been confiscated by the animal races. A few days after Rudius stayed in prison, came a man named Geese, who was also a prisoner of the animal race because he had cheated in gambling. That night, the animal race village is suddenly attacked by other members of a child trafficking organization who again intend to kidnap animal race children. Rudius and Geese decided to help the animal race to save their children with the security forces from the animal race. After a very fierce battle, Rudius finally managed to defeat Garrus and all the remaining members of the kidnapping organization. As a result of this incident, the animal race chief and the head of the security forces, Gaze, realized that Rudius was not a member of the kidnapping group. On the other hand, Soros, the village leader of Fatoa, must be willing to accept the death penalty from King Asura because he failed to deal with the magic mana explosion disaster, which resulted in many people being injured. Back to Rudius and his team, they are still trapped in the world of the animal race because the road that is the access to get out is still blocked by a big flood. Therefore, they decided to stay in the animal race village until the flood began to recede. When Eris played with Gaze's two daughters, Minotona and Tersina, Gaze felt familiar with the ring in Eris's hand. Eris tells Gaze that the ring is the ring given by Ghislaine on her 10th birthday. Hearing this, he looked surprised because it turned out that Ghislaine was Gaze's younger sister, who had been away from the animal race village for quite a long time. Ghislaine's father also felt very proud after knowing that Ghislaine had turned into a very great swordsman and even became a magic teacher for members of the kingdom. The next day when Rudius' team was about to leave for the Millie's continent, Gaze asked Eris for help to deliver his news to Ghislaine. After traveling for hours, Rudius' team finally arrived at Millie's continent, which means they were one step closer to Fatoa village. While relaxing at the inn, Rudius saw a group of people who were very suspicious because they were acting like kidnappers. However, upon further investigation, he found that they were not a group of kidnappers but a group on a mission to save their family members from slavery. And the person who led the group in carrying out the mission was Rudius' father, who was none other than Paul. After being separated for about 5 years, Rudius was very happy because he finally got to meet his father. He told all the stories of the adventures he went through to get to the Millie's continent. After telling his father many things, Rudius introduced him to Eris and Ruajerd, who had accompanied him on his journey to Fatoa. In the afternoon, Paul and Rudius' team started discussing making plans for their next trip. On a mission to find the whereabouts of Zenith, Lilia, and Aisha, Rudius' team decides to continue the search to the central continent, while Paul and Geese will search the Great Forest. Meanwhile, Roxy and her team are still gathering information regarding the traces of Rudius and his family. Before continuing the journey, Roxy decided to return to her village for a while because she had been separated from her family for too long. When Roxy arrived at her house, her parents felt very happy and welcomed her arrival with a warm hug. From the story of her parents, Roxy finally learned that Rudius had come to their village 2 years ago. After meeting with her parents, Roxy and her team continued their journey to find the whereabouts of Rudius and his family. Elsewhere, Rudius again meets the god in his dream and gets a clue about the whereabouts of Aisha and Lilia. In the dream, the god said he would find Lilia in the kingdom of Siren, but strangely the god told him not to tell Aisha his real identity. After arriving at the central continent, Rudius' team rushed to continue their journey to the territory of the Siren kingdom. When Rudius was walking through the territory of the kingdom of Siren as ordered by the god, he met a little girl who turned out to be Aisha. At that time, she tried to give him a letter, but the letter was immediately seized by the royal guards, and Aisha was almost arrested by the royal guards. Rudius had no choice but to use his magic power to defeat the royal guards and save her. After Rudius took Aisha to the hideout of his team, she then told him that Lilia was currently being held captive by one of the princes of the Siren kingdom named Pax. Hearing this, Rudius decided to go to the Siren kingdom alone while Ruajerd and Eris would be tasked with taking care of Aisha for the time being. After arriving at the palace, Rudius was brought before Pax, who was holding Lilia hostage, who was already in a limp and helpless state. Not only that, but Pax has trapped Rudius into a barrier circle that makes him unable to use his magic power. Apparently, Pax intends to take Rudius hostage so he can lure Roxy because Pax has been so obsessed with making her his girlfriend. Shortly after Pax left the room where Rudius was being held, a prince of another kingdom named Zanoba came to Rudius. At first, he thought that Zanoba would do bad things to him, but it turned out that he actually came to Rudius's place to help him escape from that place. It turned out that all this time, Zanoba really admired all the miniature artworks that Rudius had made, so he already considered Rudius his master in the arts. Long story short, thanks to the help of Zanoba, Rudius was finally able to get out of the Siren kingdom and save Lilia from Pax's hand. In rescuing Lilia, Rudius' team has successfully freed all family members from the soldiers held hostage by Pax. After that, Rudius decided to send Aisha and Lilia to the Millie's continent so they could live safely and peacefully with Paul. Meanwhile, Rudius and his team will return to continue their journey to the central continent, searching for Zenith's whereabouts. To get to the central continent, Rudius and his team had to pass through ice mountains that were very cold and experienced frequent blizzards. Also, the iceberg is dangerous because the mountains become a home for a very fierce red dragon. Therefore, Rudius advised his team to always be careful so that they do not attract the attention of the red dragon. As they passed through a cave passage, Eris and Ruijerd suddenly froze in fear as they felt the presence of a very powerful being. Surprisingly, Rudius couldn't even feel any aura like they did. After passing through a very thick fog, Rudius' team met two mysterious people walking toward them. Ruijerd warned Rudius not to get into trouble because they could be dangerous. Shortly after, the two mysterious people suddenly attacked Rudius after discovering that he had a relationship with a human god. Eris and Ruijerd tried to protect Rudius, but because the man's strength was powerful, they could easily be defeated by the man. As a result, Rudius and his team were brutally beaten by the man until they all dying. When Rudius falls unconscious, he again meets the human god, who tells him that the man is a dragon god named Orsted, one of the strongest gods of the 7 great gods. But the human god didn't tell Rudius why Orsted was so hostile to the human god. Not long after, Rudius regained his senses because Orsted had healed his wounds before he left the place. Rudius still doesn't know why Orsted did all that, but fortunately, he can continue his journey with his team. A few days later, Rudius and Eris finally arrived at Fatoa village, and Ruijerd's task of helping the two of them was finished. Before Ruijerd said goodbye to Rudius and Eris, he thanked them because they had helped him return the good name of the supered race. Ruijerd will continue his adventure alone, while Rudius and Eris will go to the camp where the villagers of Fatoa are taking refuge. After arriving at the refuge, Ghislaine greeted Rudius and Eris warmly. Unfortunately, that happiness didn't last long because Eris had to accept that her parents and grandfather had died in the mono wave explosion disaster. Not only that, but the royal advisor, Alphonse, said that Eris would be appointed as the concubine of the king of Bilemond, and if she refused, the people of Fatoa village would be punished by the king. This obviously triggers a debate between Alphonse and Ghislaine because she doesn't want Eris to marry someone she doesn't love. After a long debate, Eris decided to go on an adventure with Ghislaine and left the village of Fatoa with Rudius. On the other hand, Roxy, stopping at a nightclub, accidentally met Kishirika, who had been tied up by someone. She helped Kishirika by releasing the bonds from her body, and as a thank you, Kishirika helped her by telling her the location of Zenith's whereabouts. Using the power of Kishirika's demon eye, she learns that Zenith is currently living in a remote village called Labyrinth City on the Bigalan continent. Unfortunately, Kishirika sensed that Zenith's current health condition was very weak, and she couldn't make sure that Zenith was in a safe situation. Hearing that, Roxy, Talhand, and Ilanalis immediately rushed to the Bigalan continent before it was too late. On the other hand, Rudius finally came back from feeling down after Eris left him alone. He decided to return to continue the journey alone until he could find the whereabouts of Zenith. The moral that can be learned from this anime is to help anyone who needs help, just like Rudius, who still helps others even though he is accused of being a kidnapper.